Every nation on Earth, wealthy or struggling, stable or chaotic, shares one surprising truth. They are all drowning in debt. The United States, China, Japan, Germany, France, Brazil, India, South Africa, every single government owes massive amounts of money. Yet very few people stop to ask the most obvious question. If every country is in debt, then who is the creditor? Sounds simple. But the moment you ask it, you step into a world where the normal rules of money no longer apply. A world where debt creates money instead of destroying it. A world where entire nations owe money to institutions that create that same money out of thin air. A world where the global financial system behaves more like an illusion than a ledger. To answer this question, we need to understand how money used to work, how it changed, and how those changes produced a system where debt is both the fuel and the foundation of the world economy. For most of human history, money was something real. Gold, silver, copper, grain, livestock, physical things that you could see, hold, and measure. Kingdoms and governments could only spend what they collected or conquered. There was no mechanism for rulers to simply create more wealth on command. Scarcity forced discipline. Then something changed. As trade expanded, metal became inconvenient. So governments began issuing paper receipts claims to gold stored in vaults. These receipts became trusted, traded, and eventually treated as money themselves. But a shocking realization followed. Very few people came to take their gold back. So the institutions that held the gold quietly started issuing more receipts than they had metal. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking, the first great financial magic trick. Money could now exist without actually existing. For the first time, money didn't need to be backed by something. It only needed to be believed. This idea grew into something far more powerful. It inspired the creation of central banks institutions with the authority to issue national currency. The earliest and most influential example was the Bank of England in 1694, instead of the government. Printing its own money, it allowed a private bank to lend money to the state. In return, the bank gained the power to issue banknotes backed by government debt. A new financial loop was born. The government issues IOUs, the bank issues money, and the two become inseparable. Debt became the backbone of the money supply. For centuries, gold provided at least one anchor to reality. Even if currencies weren't fully backed, they were loosely connected to gold reserves. This prevented governments from expanding money and debt too recklessly. Then, in 1971, everything changed. U.S. President Richard Nixon severed the dollar's tie to gold. As the dollar was the world reserve currency, every major currency on Earth became backed by nothing overnight. Money became pure fiat, valuable because governments declared it valuable. Now, governments didn't just borrow money, they created money, but they didn't admit that directly. They created it through debt. When a government issues bonds and its central bank buys them, money appears in the economy. When commercial banks issue loans, money appears in the economy. Debt became the source of money. This is the system we live in today, and it explains why global debt has exploded. Worldwide, the total debt of governments, corporations, and households has reached up to $350 trillion. This number is more than triple the size of the entire world economy. And it grows faster than any nation can produce goods, collect taxes, or generate real wealth. The reason is simple. The system needs debt to survive. Debt creates money. Debt expands economies. Debt fuels spending. Debt keeps the machine running. If global debt stopped growing, the world economy would collapse instantly. Banks would fail. Currencies would contract. Governments would freeze. Jobs would disappear. The illusion would fall apart. This is why every attempt to reduce government debt fails. Raising taxes triggers public backlash. Cutting spending causes political chaos. Selling national assets angers citizens. Printing money risks inflation. Debt restructuring threatens creditors. Every fix creates new problems. So governments do the only thing left. They let the debt grow. But this brings us back to the question. If every country is borrowing money endlessly, who is lending it? Who is the creditor in a system where everyone owes and everyone is owed? The first layer of the answer is other governments. Nations buy each other's bonds. The United States owes money to Japan and China. European countries owe money to each other. The US also holds foreign debt. This creates a loop where governments owe money to countries that are themselves deeply in debt. The second layer is central banks. Central banks buy their own government's bonds, using money they create from nothing. This means the government owes debt to an institution it partially controls, but that institution is legally independent. It is a strange relationship, where the debtor and creditor are connected but not the same. The third layer is commercial banks. They buy government bonds using deposits that were created through fractional reserve banking. In other words, banks lend money they never fully had. And governments owe debt to banks that conjured money through accounting entries. The fourth layer is pension funds and investment managers. Retirement savings, mutual funds, and insurance companies buy government debt because it is considered safe. Citizens become creditors to their own governments without realizing it. The fifth layer is individuals, ordinary people who buy government bonds as investments. So who is the creditor? Everyone and no one. The global financial system itself is the creditor and the debtor. The world owes money to itself. And the cycle continues because breaking it would collapse the system. This is the paradox at the heart of global finance. Debt is not a liability, it is the foundation of modern money. Without debt, there is no currency. Without currency, there is no economy. But this structure creates instability. The United States now pays more in interest on its debt than it does on national defense. Japan's government debt is more than double its entire economic output, sustained only by its central bank, buying nearly all of it. Many European countries survive only because the European Central Bank continuously purchases their debt. Over 50 developing nations now spend more on interest payments than on healthcare. Global debt doubles roughly every decade, following an exponential curve that cannot continue forever. The system can't shrink. It can only grow. But the more it grows, the more fragile it becomes. Debt has become the lifeblood of the global economy, but also its greatest vulnerability. This leads to 3 key lessons. First, debt is money now. Every dollar, euro, yen, rupee, and peso is tied to someone else's obligation. When governments borrow, they create currency. When banks lend, they create deposits. Money is no longer a store of value. It is a network of IOUs. Second, the system requires perpetual growth. If debt stops expanding, economies shrink, spending dries up, investment collapses. Without more borrowing, the system suffocates. Third, no one is outside this system. Your salary depends on it. Your mortgage depends on it. Your retirement account depends on it. Your national currency depends on it. Your cost of living depends on it. Every citizen is both a debtor and a creditor in ways most people never realize. So the real question is not who is the creditor? The real question is, how long can a system built on infinite debt survive in a world with finite resources, finite patience, and finite trust? What happens when the illusion cracks? No one knows the exact turning point, but the direction is becoming clearer. The world has built a financial system that requires endless expansion and punishes contraction. A system where debt is both medicine and poison. A system where the creditor is everywhere and nowhere. A system held together, not by gold, not by logic, but by belief. The only certainty is this: understanding the illusion makes you far less vulnerable to it. Knowledge breaks the spell. If you want to keep exploring the hidden mechanics of money, power, and debt, stay curious, stay awake, and keep asking the questions most people never think to ask. If you want to explore the hidden structure of the global financial system, if you want more deep stories that expose the mechanisms behind money, debt, and power, subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who still thinks government debt works like personal debt, because the more people understand the system, the less power the illusion holds.